Good afternoon and good morning and good evening somewhere in the world, I believe. But in Geneva, good afternoon. Distinguished delegates, colleagues, and ladies and gentlemen, allow me to first welcome all of you to today's side event on local governments and human rights. My thanks go out to the co-sponsors, Chile, Egypt, Romania, and OHCHR for their valuable support. I would also like to express my gratitude to the distinguished speakers and participants here with us. The Republic of Korea, in close cooperation with the core group and OHCHR, took the initiative to organize this side event in order to further explore the role of local governments in ensuring human rights, particularly in post-pandemic recovery. We hope that this event could be an opportunity to raise awareness on this issue through exchange of ideas among relevant stakeholders. Since the adoption of the first resolution in 2013, local governments have been increasingly recognized for their role in the promotion and the protection of human rights. This is particularly the case in this difficult time of crisis. Given its proximity to people, local governments have a unique position in addressing local needs and priorities. As an actor on the ground, the local governments are at the forefront of COVID-19 response and recovery, with their capacity to take decisive actions to protect and promote the human rights of their residents. I'm confident today that this opportunity to hear insightful observations and perspectives from experts and practitioners alike will further deepen our understanding on the role of local governments in ensuring human rights. Without further ado, I would like to go to the opening statement. For the opening part of this event, we have three distinguished speakers, and they have gracefully agreed to bless this event. And I thank all of them for being with us today. I will invite them one by one. And our first guest speaker is Her Excellency Ms. Nada Al-Nashif, United Nations Deputy High Commissioner for Human Rights. And she is joining us through a pre-recorded video. So I will ask her to speak in that format.
Excellencies, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the topic of this side event is as relevant as it is timely. 1.5 years after the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are still struggling with the effects of this devastating crisis. While the pandemic has worsened existing inequalities, particularly affecting persons and groups in situations of vulnerability, and has had a negative impact on a wide range of human rights, some of the measures taken to combat it have further curtailed these very rights. Individuals and households living on the poverty line are particularly at risk of being pushed back into extreme poverty. Indeed, according to World Bank projections, the COVID-19 pandemic may have pushed up to 124 million people into extreme poverty in 2020, with the total potentially rising to as many as 163 million people by 2021. We have an opportunity working collectively to shape the societies we want post-pandemic at national, regional, and local levels. The Human Rights Council has recognized that while the primary responsibility for the promotion and protection of human rights lies with national governments, local governments have an essential role to play. Acknowledging the need for increased collaboration with local authorities, the Secretary-General announced the creation of an advisory group on local and regional governments in his new report, Our Common Agenda. We have seen local governments operate at the forefront to prevent the spread of COVID-19 and mitigate its impact on communities. For example, in York, in the UK, local authorities and civil society organizations quickly set up a COVID-19 helpline, as well as community hubs, providing support to people in vulnerable situations. Valencia, in Spain, provided access to adequate and affordable housing to groups in situation of vulnerability, including youth, older people, persons with disabilities, and victims of gender-based violence, whose housing conditions has been affected by the pandemic. The city of Rosario in Argentina and the province of Pichincha in Ecuador developed programs for victims of gender-based violence, including the creation of hotlines, detention centers, and protocols to address violence against women and girls, which increased during the pandemic. Beyond the immediate response, local governments must also be part of the recovery from the pandemic to build better and more resilient cities, reducing urban inequalities and mitigating the impact on those in situations of vulnerability to future shocks. Since the onset of the pandemic, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and our human rights mechanisms have issued extensive guidance on COVID-19, much of which is relevant for local governments. Some concrete action that national and local authorities may take includes accurately mapping inequalities and their root causes so as to address them efficiently, ensuring uninterrupted accessibility to appropriate health and social services available to everyone on an equal and non-discriminatory basis, carrying out needs assessments of persons with disabilities with attention to children, women, and girls with disabilities, persons with high support requirements, and older persons, ensuring that economic recovery programs are inclusive of persons with disabilities and their families, taking targeted steps to prevent additional people from becoming homeless. Good practices, such as moratoriums on evictions and deferrals of mortgage payments, should be broadly replicated. Addressing housing issues aggravated by COVID-19 and developing rights-based housing strategies through consultations. Involving civil society in the design and implementation of COVID-19 technologies, such as contact tracing apps, and promoting social dialogue on these technologies to consider how they impact society. Such initiatives and actions by local governments in the promotion and protection of human rights will be outlined in our office's report to be presented at the 51st session of the Human Rights Council. There will also be an opportunity at the upcoming 11th World Human Rights Cities Forum in Gwangju in the Republic of Korea to discuss the role of local governments in the post-pandemic recovery and to identify best practices and ways in which local governments, local legislatures, civil society, business enterprises, and others can work together to ensure vibrant and sustainable societies that can fulfill the aspirations of their citizens and populations across the world. I wish you continued fruitful discussions, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate Madam Nada Al-Nashif's opening remarks for her comprehensive statement. I think she highlighted very comprehensively the importance of the role played by the local government, and she gave us some also concrete specific examples of the best practices which we could take into account when we adopt the local level government policy. Now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Adrian Cosmin Vierita, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Romania, to deliver his opening statement. Ambassador Vierita.
Good afternoon, good morning. Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you, Your Excellency, for your moderation, and also thank you for this initiative. I'm both privileged and honored to participate in this event. Romania would like to thank Republic of Korea for this initiative, and at the same time is proud to join Chile and Egypt in supporting the discussion on the role of local governments in ensuring human rights in post-pandemic recovery. I also would like to thank the Deputy High Commissioner for the statement, and I also would like to thank her and the High Commissioner for hosting the events and also for their personal engagements and leadership in addressing human rights challenges worldwide, challenges that are augmented by the COVID-19 crisis. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that everybody would agree that local government is accountable to citizens and that they are responsible for public services they offer to the members of their local community. I think that it's undisputed that local government is a key player in promoting and protecting human rights, and also at the same time making them a tangible reality of our day-to-day life. And I'm saying this because inequality and discrimination or housing or healthcare and education, just to mention a few challenges, have big local impacts. And allow me to refer to education as an example that I have chosen, not only because education is something that would shape the individual destiny of the members of next generations, but also, I'm sorry for this interruption, but also because education has a multiplier effect. And at the end of the day, irrespective of how long the day will be, this will have an impact on even on healthcare systems or society as a whole. But in order to achieve this synergy that is needed and to empower and engage both local government and citizens, I think of a few, if you like to call them methods, that may be taken into account, and I know that they are taken into account. I only wanted to emphasize that they may be used to strengthen the collective efforts of ours during these challenging times. I am referring to awareness raising. Human rights are important at local and regional levels, and I think it's important that both politicians, local politicians and citizens could benefit from these awareness raising. I believe that the Deputy High Commissioner mentioned already that good practices. I was also inclined to refer to these good practices of implementation of human rights at local and regional level in member states. And I think that exchange of good practices will benefit both local government and citizens. I also would like in this context to refer, and this is also something that Deputy High Commissioner mentioned in her presentation, it is about partnerships. We truly believe in partnerships between local governments and other stakeholders, including NGOs, civil society representatives, but also academia and private business. Finally, Your Excellency, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to refer to the cooperation at international level, but focusing on human rights and local government. Romania has been a supporter of the cooperation between the UN and regional organizations. And we believe that regional organizations who also have a focus on human rights and local government could strengthen our collective efforts. And in Europe, if I may refer to one example, is the Council of Europe. We believe that cooperating with regional organizations would benefit both local government and citizens, and, well, of course, take into consideration that resources are limited, and also take into consideration that we should avoid unnecessary overlapping. But in principle, we would like to bring to your kind attention this form of cooperation as maybe being one of the avenues that we should continue to explore. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Verita. I think you touched upon many important elements in discussing this issue, and particularly the advocacy approach, as well as the partnership with among many stakeholders, and so that we can have real policy impact, at the level of the local government to implement their respective policies, particularly from the perspective of the human rights. Thank you very much for your comments. And now let me give the floor to our last speaker, Dr. Khaled Zakaria Amin, head of the Macroeconomic Policy Center at the Institute of National Planning of Egypt. Dr. Amin, actually, I would just let you know that your ambassador the other day, when I talked to him, really insisted that you are the person who can make real contribution to this seminar. So I'm very happy to have you here today with us. So Dr. Amin, please go ahead.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Good afternoon, esteemed members of the core group on local government and the human rights, our colleagues and friends from South Korea, Chile, and Romania, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to join you today at this important side event that focuses on one of the pressing and critical issues. Ladies and gentlemen, the world has to come together, uniting and collaborating in facing the challenges that have emerged due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The crisis has aggravated pre-existing inequalities and public service provision and the crisis management weaknesses. Indeed, the COVID-19 pandemic goes beyond the health crisis. The response of local governments has varied widely, not only across countries, but also within the same country. The effectiveness and the efficiency of local government played a crucial role in the implementation of COVID-19 response measures. At the beginning of the pandemic, there was an intense debate on the extent of the negative aspects of such measures. The healthy debate was behind adopting balanced human rights-based policies towards achieving inclusive recovery. Egypt's constitution established solid ground to ensure human rights and to empower local administration. The constitution devolves power from the central government to local authorities. It gives considerable autonomy in decision-making and financial resources mobilization to the local level. Moreover, the constitution determines a specific quota for youth and women in the elected local councils as a practice to boost inclusiveness. It also guarantees a suitable representation of Christians and people with disabilities. Egypt's National Human Rights Strategy 21-26, launched in September 2021, puts the road forward to sustain these constitution mandates. The Egyptian government believes that achieving economic development and handling crises such as COVID-19 would be realized through empowering local authorities. In collaboration with the World Bank, the Egyptian government is implementing the Upper Egypt Local Development Program. In addition to target the poor through basic services, including health and education, this program aims at enhancing local governance and the partnerships with civil society organizations and the business community at the local level. In the same vein, the Egyptian parliament is discussing the draft law of local administration and the government planning. These two laws enhance the foundation of decentralization in Egypt and accelerate its implementation. The responsibilities assigned to the local level were essential to deal with the COVID-19 and its economic and social consequences in a way that respects the different circumstances of local communities. Although the government of Egypt was responsible for putting the rules, standards, and the medical protocols, each governorate was left to decide on the mode and sequence of implementation and enforcement. I trust you agree that community local level checks and balances ensure that both community-based organizations and local governments can be held accountable to their respective constituencies regarding their response to COVID-19. Societal accountability at the local level played an important role in addressing human rights concerns while dealing with this dangerous pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2014, Egypt embarked on a strong reform program to undertake significant structural, economic, and social reforms to reduce its large fiscal deficit and restore macroeconomic stability. This economic reform program had remarkably contributed to increasing the resilience of Egypt's economy and enabled it to maintain its positive economic growth rate during the COVID-19 crisis. In addition, the program enabled the government to allocate an emergency response package worth 100 billion Egyptian pound, approximately 1.7 of GDP, to enhance preparedness, response, and the governance related to manage COVID-19. Egypt also adopted and implemented various inclusive development interventions. Haya Karima project, Decent Life project in English, is one of these interventions. Decent Life project was launched in 2019 and is being implemented by local authorities in the poorest areas in Egypt. The project aims to improve the living conditions and the quality of life of almost 58 million Egyptians, with a focus on persons in vulnerable situations. It also opens the door for effective public-private partnership and the viable participation of civil society organizations. This project received a specific recognition from the United Nations as one of the best practices to realize SDG. According to United Nations, Decent Life project contributed to mitigating the negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. This fact has been also stated in the Egypt Human Development Report 2021 that was issued last month by the United Nations Development Program. Ladies and gentlemen, the Egyptian government worked with immense efforts to promote the localization of SDGs as a catalyst for inclusive development in accordance with the Human Rights Council Resolution number 45/7. The localization efforts, as well as growing ICT applications, helped the country in facing the unprecedented impact of the pandemic. Given the importance of sharing knowledge and experiences among local stakeholders, Egypt Governors Council mechanism served as an interactive and public awareness platform for sharing knowledge and experiences among local actors regarding the pandemic itself, the management of local health organizations, and vaccine distribution methods. Esteemed participants, let us recommit to strengthen participation and knowledge sharing among our nations. It's important to learn from our experiences and share them for shaping better inclusive recovery policies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amin, for your insightful statement with a particular focus on the real example of the Egyptian policy experience at the level of local governments, and particularly the interactions between the policy responses to the COVID-19 and its impact on human rights. So I really appreciate your insightful statement. Thank you very much. And now I think we go to the main part of our seminar, our side event, that is panel discussion. And when I look at the watch, the clock, we are only 5 minutes late as compared to the original schedule. So it's not that bad yet. But always as a moderator, I have to be mindful about the time available for all of us. So I will try to speed up the process. The main part of the event, will be will be featured by 4 panelists, and the first panelist, Dr. Maha El Rabat, Professor and WHO Director General's Special Envoy on COVID-19 Preparedness and Response. I think she is here. Thank you very much. And we are also joined by Ms. Mona Rishimawi, Chief of the Rule of Law, Equality and Non-Discrimination Branch in OHCHR. Thank you. And Ambassador Yoon Chul, a good friend of mine, and he is now serving as the diplomatic advisor to the Gwangju Metropolitan City Mayor, and he is speaking from Korea. And last but not least, also I have the pleasure to introduce Ms. Amanda Pleti Martinez, coordinator of the Committee on Social Inclusion, Participatory Democracy and Human Rights at United Cities and Local Governments, UCLG. And I really would like to welcome all of you to this panel. And your various background and expertise and experiences will help us share insights on the main topic for today's panel discussion, identifying the role of the local governments in protecting and promoting human rights in this particular time of period, and particularly post-COVID-19 recovery phase, which we hope that will come soon. On just one side note, in an effort to make this discussion more interactive, we have opened the online chat to collect some comments and questions. So our chat moderator, Ms. Adriana Gavrilovic, will collect them and help us make sure that they are addressed after the panel discussion. Okay, so I would like to first invite Dr. El Rabat to take the floor. I understand that given the area where she is working on, I think she will brief us on potential public health priorities for local governments in the post-pandemic recovery phase. Dr. El Rabat, please take the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency, and Excellencies, distinguished guests, and fellow panelists. So it gives me great honor to be invited as one of WHO's envoys on COVID-19 to participate. So without further introductions, I'll just go directly into the focus of the panel. So by now we are all aware of the human rights dimensions of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we are aware of the deficiencies, challenges, fault lines it has exposed within and across the countries and around the globe. So it's exploiting the inequalities, disproportionately impacting elderly, women, children, vulnerable groups, and those that are faced with pre-existing social and economic disadvantage. So these are all collective public health focuses that we need to really be very aware of. And as well, we have also seen the impact on the healthcare workers on the front line of exposure and response, having around 70% of them women. So the WHO has been working with many other partners to address inequitable access to the COVID-19 vaccines through the COVAX facility. So in advocating for the vaccine equity, that increased the financial commitment to this innovative collaboration. And as well, trying to provide guidance on the global and the national vaccine access. The pledges and additional commitments from the recent global COVID-19 summit has led and has really opened the way for encouraging insights to fulfill the commitment. But yet, almost a year since the first COVID-19 vaccine received the emergency use listing by the WHO, we are seeing vast disparities in vaccine access, increasing the inequity divide. And so we have to acknowledge that not only does the inequitable access to vaccine is not saving the lives, but is as well increasing the risk of dangerous viral mutations and deepening the inequalities within and among the states. So effective response and recovery will depend not just on the global solidarity, but on the local governments and public health authorities that are uniquely positioned to know and identify the groups in the communities that have been hardest hit by the pandemic, and to ensure that the public health goods like the COVID-19 vaccines and other technologies reach those most in need first. So in response and recovery from the COVID-19, the role of the local government is vital. And we need to ensure coordinated, gender transformative, equity-oriented, rights-based response that addresses the collective commitment to leave no one behind. And as it's always said, that we need to think globally, but to act locally, according to the context and according to the relevance of the situation. So in the recovery and transformative efforts to universal coverage, the local governments, they need to emphasize the essential and essentiality in applying the rights-based approach with transparency, participation, non-discrimination, but as well with accountability to reach out to the diversity of communities, civil society leaders to identify who is furthest behind. So we need this aggregated data. We need to identify our targets and to find out the gaps, and need for the COVID-19 tools, the vaccines, the innovative technologies, the access to essential health services, but as well, we need the local governments in order to emphasize how to build more resilient and inclusive, equitable systems for health and for other sectors that are really impacting health and the well-being, including the communities and building the resilience of the communities. So this is how we're building back better. And here I would like to stress and emphasize the need for investing or better and good investment in building the resilience of systems, including the health systems, emphasizing the universal health coverage, strengthening and investing in health security, public health security, and the primary health care. So moving to the health in all policies, that is not only a reflection of the WHO's approach to the social determinants of health, it is essential to understand how the health inequalities are a result of the structural disadvantages well beyond the health sector and in the disparate social and economic impacts of this pandemic, too often fueled by relentless campaigns of disinformation, malinformation, and in some cases by messages targeting groups already vulnerable as a result of the systemic inequality and marginalization. Again, the local governments are key to countering the public health misinformation and discriminatory messages about the COVID-19. The right to accurate, accessible health information is an essential element, and this requires a newer communication narrative that would really engulf and put the framework for what is needed from the communities as partners and empowered communities for the post-recovery period. So by prioritizing the cross-sectoral partnerships with the civil society and community leaders and public health experts, local governments, they have the opportunity to implement a rights-based public health response and recovery while building the community resilience to the response. So we are building forward to the new norm, realizing that we are never going back to our previous situation. So we need to identify the root causes of the health inequalities and invest in social, economic, and public health measures, but as well we need data, and we need disaggregated data and monitoring systems to hold everyone accountable for the outcomes. And we need to advance the progress of leaving no one behind commitment, which is essential, not only for improving the health equity, but in advancing the progress on all SDGs. Progressively realizing the right to health means systematically identifying and eliminating the inequalities that results in health, social, and economic disparities, and doing so requires the local government actions, investment, and commitment within and beyond this crisis. So COVID-19 is staying with us in the foreseeable future, and although it has like other epidemics before, exposed the inequalities, but maybe more, of course, but it is the opportunity and the catalyst for building more equal and equitable society, building integrated systems response at the local level. Thank you very much.
Rabat, for your thought-provoking remarks, and actually you reminded us of where we stand actually in fighting COVID-19, and also, you reminded us that we should not lose the overall perspective in approaching the human rights issue in this difficult time. And thank you very much for your summary of the entire situation, particularly in the area of the health priorities for local governments. And now let us go over to Ms. Mona Rishmawi. I'm sorry for my bad pronunciation. I think she will tell us more about actions that the local government can undertake to better promote the right to equality and non-discrimination and protect peoples in vulnerable and marginalized situations in post-pandemic recovery phase. Ms. Rishmawi, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. I really appreciate being in this meeting and this side event. Allow me also to thank the co-organizers for this important side event, your own government, the Republic of Korea, Chile, Egypt, and Romania. The Deputy High Commissioner already has highlighted and covered a lot of grounds around how local governments have been at the front line of COVID-19, not only in responding to the pandemic, but also in seeking to address its proportionate impact on persons and groups in vulnerable circumstances. I would like in this context to highlight two groups and then make maybe three at the end, highlight three areas where we think that the work of local government or the attention of local governments can be particularly impactful. For many women, as the Deputy High Commissioner mentioned, for many women in abusive situations, staying at home, as we were all asked to do, became a daily nightmarish experience. In this context, we were very pleased to see local authorities investing in online care services, creating temporary shelters for victims, and providing psychological support. I'd like to mention two examples, one from the north and one from the south. Madrid, as a city, allocated additional resources to social services for women and children during the pandemic, but also Botswana created local emergency centers and raised awareness and engaged the community in addressing gender-based violence. The other group that I would like to highlight is members of minorities. They often face greater impact of the pandemic, including its economic downturn. In some countries, some local authorities distributed information in Roma language, including through a dedicated website, and allocated financial resources for the provision of medical supplies and equipment to Roma community. In the southern part of Tunisia, where the Amazigh people are centered, governors took steps to distribute food staples. In New York City, when a lot of people of African descent and other minorities, Asian descent, Latinos and other minorities live, a moratorium on eviction was actually undertaken. They banned the eviction during the outbreak, and the city of New York provided free legal help and short long-term support to anyone facing evictions. As you can see, it's very important for the Office of the High Commissioner to document these positive practices. And these positive practices indicate that local government, it's just not a word, it's we feel it, we all feel it in our own communities. They are the first respondents to what is going on in the pandemic. These examples show that how local governments have stepped up in addressing the adverse impact of the pandemic on some vulnerable populations. They also demonstrate how local governments can be successful advocates for the rights and needs of those facing inequality and discrimination. So in addition to the points that raised by the Deputy High Commissioner, I would like to highlight 3 areas where we think that the role of their role is particularly crucial. You will not be surprised if I say that the first point for us is ensuring effective participation of concerned communities in policy-making processes. Already a number of communities have been, or a number of groups have been mentioned, women, racial and ethnic minorities, and of course, older persons. In order to mitigate the adverse impact of COVID measures, those who are mostly affected by the policies that are taken in the context of COVID must be effectively consulted in their design. Their involvement increases the ability to identify gaps and to create and to find practical solutions that help managing the adverse impact of the pandemic. We have pointed and we have documented good examples, good practices in that regard. Let me just mention one. In Guatemala City, the local government convenes meetings with different sectors to seek their views on the development and implementation of public policies. The second issue is fostering equality, diversity, and inclusion. This is an extremely important point for our office. Local authorities often have an accurate understanding not only of the composition of the population, but also of the local socioeconomic realities they live. As local policies are advanced within the framework of national legislation, local authorities are best placed to champion the inclusion of equality and non-discrimination principles in national legal framework, so that no one is left behind. We have documented a number of very good examples in this regard that I will not mention for the. The third issue that I'd like to highlight is collaborating with human rights actors, and how this is crucial in understanding vulnerabilities. These actors may differ from community to community, and there are varying methods of enhancing the implementation of human rights at the local level. They can be national human rights institutions, they can be local ombudspersons, they can be consumer complaint boards, local human rights organizations, and anti-discrimination agencies. Listening to those who are attuned to the local concerns enable the local authorities to tailor solutions to what will work in particular context. So our hope is that local authorities will also champion and protect human rights defenders that are working in their communities. We in OHCHR are exploring, and as you heard from the Deputy High Commissioner, and I hope from me now, we are exploring and documenting all these practices as we are preparing a report that the states requested from us through Human Rights Council Resolution 45/7. The mandate of this resolution requests us to address the role of local government and the challenges they face in the promotion and protection of human rights, including in relation to the right of equality and non-discrimination and the protection of persons in vulnerable situations. The idea and the view is to identify possible elements and principles guiding local and national governments We will be issuing an invitation to submit input for the report in the coming few weeks, and we hope to receive the input from national and local governments, because our goal is really to help national authorities in their work, in their important work in confronting this terrible pandemic, but also in enhancing the protections in their own society. I look forward to hearing the other participants and the other panelists, and I thank you for this already excellent presentation and look forward to the questions. Thank you for your attention, and thank you, Mr. Ambassador.
Very much, Ms. Nishimawi. I really appreciate your valuable insights. And I think here we have many representatives of local governments all over the world, actually. And I'm sure that they might have picked up some important points you have raised and you have highlighted, particularly with regard to their effective efforts to fight against the COVID-19, at the same time promoting and enhancing the human rights while also addressing the specific needs of the local residents. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And now I would like to give the floor to our third panelist for today, Ambassador Untitled. And I understand that your city will organize next week the annual World Human Rights City Forum, which actually I attended once when I was in the capital. So I would appreciate if you could share some, themes and directions of that forum, and also you may wish to share some good practices of the city, your city, Gwangju city of Korea, in protecting and promoting human rights in the pandemic fighting phase as well as the post-pandemic recovery phase. Ambassador Yoon, please. Excuse me, I think your microphone is muted. So could you unmute your microphone so that we can hear your voice?
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Excellencies and dear colleagues, I'm very much honored to be with you today. Before I start, I wish to thank Ambassador Lee, my brother from Korean Foreign Service, for chairing this important session. As Ambassador for International Relations for the city of Gwangju, I wish to introduce the World Human Rights Cities Forum that the city has hosted since 2011, as well as the city's human rights policies as based on lessons learned from history and also our experience with COVID-19 pandemic. But I was also glad to note that there were many common elements between what has been presented by Ambassador of Romania and Dr. Maha, Dr. Mona, Dr. Khaled. There are also many inspirations that we can pick up and apply to our practices later on. So I will present the case of Gwangju. The World Human Rights Cities Forum, held annually in Gwangju, Korea since 2011, is a meeting point for local, regional, and global actors that work in the field and support the human rights cities policies and practices. The forum has strengthened the links among different regional experiences and initiatives and played an important role in defining local government's global agenda for human rights and local democracy. This year, as Ambassador Lee pointed out, the Gwangju Metropolitan City is hosting the 11th World Human Rights Cities Forum from October 7th to the 10th, under the theme, Human Rights in Times of Challenge, a New Social Contract. This forum will help us develop a deeper understanding of the current societal challenges facing humanity, such as the pandemic and climate change, and to discuss how cities can build resilient local communities. The forum will be joined by Secretary General Antonio Guterres of the United Nations with his congratulatory remarks, as well as keynote speeches by the forum's co-hosts, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Madame Michelle Bachelet, and Assistant Director General of UNESCO, Ms. Gabriela Ramos. The 2021 World Human Rights Forum has 53 sessions, including official events, plenary sessions, and thematic sessions partnered with 54 Korean and international organizations. Plenary sessions will share the experiences of various local governments as they implement human rights policies amid the current crisis and formulate recommendations. Thematic sessions will discuss issues in 8 areas, including disability, the elderly, and refugees, and create frameworks for recommended projects. While Gwangju plays a leading role in the Korean Human Rights Cities Council, the city also serves as co-chair of the United Cities and Local Government, UCLG, Committee on Social Inclusion, Participatory Democracy, and Human Rights, under a very competent assistance of Amanda here, and the chair of the UNESCO Coalition of Cities Against Discrimination in Asia and the Pacific, in order to expand the global human rights network. In parallel, the World Human Rights Cities Forum works to expand the Human Rights Alliance across the world and works to support partnerships for localization of human rights, as already been pointed out, as a strategy to improve human rights protection mechanisms at the local level. Gwangju has grown into a human rights city based on its historical experiences. During the May 18th democratization movement of 1980, citizens of Gwangju stood up to protect their basic rights to life, freedom, happiness, and democracy. Afterwards, the citizens did not just dwell on their past, but took steps forward. In May 1998, the Civil Society of Gwangju hosted an international conference for the Declaration of Asian Human Rights Charter. In 2011, the Human Rights Documentary Heritage Archives for the May 18th Democratic Uprising was inscribed on UNESCO's Memory of the World Registry. In August of 2012, the 9th Human Rights Council Advisory Committee officially selected human rights cities as a research topic. In September of the following year, the resolution on local governments and human rights was adopted by the Council. The resolution reflected the conceptual framework and guiding principles of human rights cities set out by the World Human Rights Cities Forum in 2014. The final report adopted in the resolution highly appreciated the role and function of the forum. In the meantime, Gwangju has established various institutional frameworks to protect and promote the human rights of its own citizens, including the introduction of Gwangju Human Rights Charter, the Human Rights Indicators, and Human Rights Neighborhood Projects. Other cities in Korea and beyond have emulated such policies. In 2019, the UN OHCHR report on local government and human rights cited our policies on human rights as a good example. As COVID-19 cases rapidly increased, the Korean government promptly acted by tracking confirmed patients and shutting down the facilities visited by them, and imposed a 2-week self-quarantine on those who came into contact with the patients and all international travelers entering Korea as well. In response to the concern raised on possible infringement of human rights, such as rights to privacy, the Korean government also made every effort to protect human rights by establishing guidelines on the disclosure of travel logs of confirmed COVID-19 patients. In line with the policies of the central government, Gwangju is also working on the following measures. Firstly, the city formed a public-private joint committee on COVID-19, collaborative governance to take democratic and transparent responses with local medical institutions and civil society. In addition, the city has quarantined international entrants in a residential treatment center and monitored them through the Self-Quarantine Safety Protection app, but without disclosing the information that can be used to identify the infected. The city has a goal to vaccinate its citizens of 1.2 million people of age 18 and older quickly and safely to achieve herd immunity by November this year. City has 6 districts, and we have COVID center, we have operated COVID-19 vaccination center in each district, and we are also mobilizing 400 medical centers to vaccinate as many citizens as possible. Secondly, the city has taken a human rights-based approach to taking care of vulnerable groups who are hit disproportionately hard by the disaster. Gwangju provides emergency living expense payments to low-income families and financial support to micro businesses and SMEs at low or no interest rates. And fees on many utility services were frozen at the current levels. Thirdly, the city has responded to the pandemic based on the spirit of sharing and solidarity. Gwangju showed an example of sickbed alliance by sharing its hospital rooms and medical staff with Daegu City, another major city on the east side. When Gwangju saw a soaring number of cases, Daegu dispatched 10 nurses to the city to provide assistance in return. Fourthly, we opened the online COVID-19 recovery center for the first time in Korea and have been treating the recovered patients to help them overcome psychological pain to return to their normal life. When the ongoing efforts to tackle the pandemic, with the ongoing efforts, we are implementing 3 strategies to become more inclusive. I heard the word inclusive again and again from other speakers, and a resilient human rights city in post-COVID era. Firstly, we will build a public health infrastructure to cope with new infectious diseases. So the Gwangju Public Medical Center with 40 negative pressure sick beds and 210 general sick beds will open in 2024, and Honam Regional Infectious Disease Specialist Hospital will open in 2023. Secondly, we will build a carbon neutral and energy self-sufficient city by 2045. The COVID-19 pandemic revealed that infectious diseases are closely related to climate change. In response to this threat, we will convert electricity sources to 100% renewable energy in order to transition to a green city. To help achieve that, we will launch initiatives to plant 30 million trees, create urban parks, and recycle 100% of household waste. All of these projects will be carried out by engaging more than 100 civic groups, companies, and government organizations. Thirdly, we will strengthen the network of human rights cities. Since 2011, our forum has served to enhance solidarity among human rights movements at the local government level. Under the current circumstances, solidarity in human rights activities has become all the more necessary. We will do our best to contribute to global solidarity with international human rights organizations, local governments, and NGOs to overcome the various crises faced by humanity. The accumulation of experiences during our work on human rights city movement has resulted in forming an inclusive and human rights friendly culture in many areas of society. I hope we can overcome difficult times together by forging a firm solidarity with all those from around the world who attend today's session. In closing, I would like to add that as an outsider myself, I'm enjoying the beautiful city of Gwangju, its culture, its food, and its nice people. So all of you will be welcome as well for our post-pandemic era. But I hope that I will see as many of you as possible next week at the 11th World Human Rights Cities Forum in Gwangju. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Your high pitch about Gwangju as a final destination after the recovery of the COVID-19. I really appreciate your comprehensive remarks. And now let us hear from today's last panelist, Ms. Amanda Pleti Martinez. We have just heard about the local government's work on the ground as well as the engagement at the international level, and I hope that you will tell us more about the ongoing work at the international level, to connect local governments worldwide for the protection and promotion of human rights. So I would like to give the floor to Ms. Pleti Martinez. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Ambassador Lee. Dear Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be there with you today and to be part of this session. I don't know if I am able to share screen because I have like a quick PowerPoint, 3 slides. Would it be possible to share screen? Thank you. Maybe I would like, first of all, to sincerely thank you this invitation, but above all the work and the process around local governments and human rights provided by the Embassy of Korea, of Chile, Egypt, and Romania. This is a meaningful work for us from UCLG. So UCLG is the United Cities and Local Government, is the widest local government network across the world. We gather more than 250,000 cities and territories from all the different regions. And I coordinate the Committee on Social Inclusion, Participatory Democracy and Human Rights, which is a special space where local government committed to human rights and to the right to city are gathering to exchange experiences. And I would like maybe to start highlighting the importance of the work around this resolution for us. UCLG and the Committee on Social Inclusion has been very involved since the beginning of this resolution because it means three key points for us. One, of course, because it's acknowledging the role of local and regional government promoting and defending human rights, but also highlighting the responsibility and the accountability of the closest level of local government to the people. And that's a very important input for us. Secondly, because this resolution helped to recognize those allergies who are committed with human rights at the local level, who are engaged with human rights principles, who are implementing human rights-based approach in their local policies. And this is the support that we need because today this kind of engagement still remains from very individual commitment and initiative of local leaders. And third, because beyond bringing recognition to this initiative led by cities like Gwangju, like Vienna, like Montreal, like Mexico, it's also a way to build this idea of the international movement of human rights cities. It helps to bring together all these different actions that we are seeing and all that these different experiencing, creating dialogue between what is happening with local government in Asia, in Africa, in Europe, in the Americas. And that is possible if we are having this dialogue with the OHCHR, with the UN agencies on the role of local government and human rights. I prepared a presentation, but maybe I would just change a little bit what I wanted to share with you because I was hearing the other speakers. I think it's very important to highlight that we are in a moment where all the human rights discussion are at the heart of the discussion in our constituency of UCLG, at the heart of the discussion of local and regional governments. First of all, because human rights issues have been growing with the pandemic. We are seeing a rising of inequalities, of poverty, but also of urban violence, of xenophobia, of hunger, of all the difficulties with local economy, and that's very concrete human rights challenges that are happening at the local level. Secondly, because most of the time, these challenges are opening new areas of intervention for local governments. Then a lot of local governments are not used to have local policies dealing with food or with health. And that's important to understand that this is also new approaches that are being opened with this pandemic, new responsibilities of local government, new competencies, and new responsibilities on the way to provide responses. The good news is that besides being at the out of the discussion, we have seen a lot of action. And that was mentioned by the DHC on her opening speech and also mentioned by the other speakers during the session. We have seen a lot of local initiative led by local and regional government to respond to these challenges, to the human rights challenges. Maybe I would like here to share with you 3 thoughts more than exploring concrete policies. First is this idea on how we can ensure that these short-term and emergency responses can be transformed in more mid and long-term responses. How what we have been seeing at the local level can be transformed to be more instrumental policies at the heart of the local agendas. The second point is also maybe to highlight that beyond the emergency responses that we have been seeing, it's also important to showcase that choices made by local government can make the difference. And when you're a woman, victims of violence, especially during the lockdown measures, is not the same if you're living in a city where you can call a hotline, when you can have an access to emergency shelter, when you're living in a city where you have no access to any kind of public mechanism that can respond to your problems. And that's something also we've been trying to bring as listeners from the pandemic, is that local choices made by local governments can make the difference in the everyday life of their citizens. And local governments who are engaging with human rights policies, have been more able in some way to respond to these consequences that we have been seeing during the pandemic and after the pandemic. That's, I think, one of the key lessons that we've been hearing from our constituency in all the UCLG debates along this year. The third point is also that we should not forget about the other crisis. And we were hearing the ambassador of Gwangju was also highlighting the forum and the importance to not forget about the climate crisis, to not forget about the democratic crisis, because we have been seeing a lot of human rights violation in a lot of different situations this year, in South America, in Myanmar, and we're seeing a rise also of this violation of human rights, of these human rights values, democratic values who are stepping back. And this should be connected on to all the debate on how maybe not to build back better only, but also on how to build forward better. No, because what we are trying to look here is to make the shift, bring transformation to the local agendas through the human rights-based approach. Maybe on what we also been witnessing within UCLG with all this international agenda is, of course, that we want, as local government network, to put rights at the heart of the agenda. And UCLG is building now a pact for the future, which is around the pact for the people, a pact for the planet, and the pact to renew the government, the way we can have multi-level dialogue and build inclusive multilateralism, including cities. And all of this should be nurtured by the experience of the pandemic, of course. And one of the key response here is that local government wants to put rights-based approach at the heart of the response to this crisis. Maybe because I don't want to be too long, but I just wanted to finish with my last slide. Is a little bit on the responses that we're bringing, no? The concrete responses, what we're building now from UCLG and from the Committee on Social Inclusion. So now we are having 3 ongoing processes in UCLG. First, we adopted 10 years ago a UCLG Charter Agenda on Human Rights in the City, and we're trying now to launch a series of consultation based also on the experience coming from the crisis on how to renew these documents. Also, how to explore the new rights. We have heard, for example, all the challenge around the digitalization rights, what it means for local government, the way they can respond to that. So what is the new generation of rights we want to promote based on local realities and responses? The second ongoing process is the launching of an international campaign to always try to bring more cities to adopt human rights principles, and we're going to have these 10, 100, and 1,000 cities and territories for human rights. And third, we're also launching a learning platform for local government, exploring concrete policies led by local governments in the framework of human rights and promoting responses to the right to housing, to tackle discrimination, to include migrants, how to build inclusive citizenship, how to include better women's rights, or how to fight violence against women, and really try to link all these different challenges through the umbrella of the human rights from a local perspective. And then we are also having 2 very important milestones for us. One is, we are going to have an agreement between the OHCHR and UCLG to advance this international movement of human rights cities, and also the way their vision on how to respond to the aftermath of the crisis and the pandemic. And then support, of course, all the initiative led by local government from our network to promote international dialogue, regional dialogue, and also national dialogue. So here we have been supporting for example, all the discussion in Europe now with European cities who are trying to promote this framework of commitment of human rights cities with the Fundamental Rights Agency of Europe. Of course, there is, as we heard before, the Forum of Guangzhou, which is the main space at the international level to discuss between human rights cities on the concrete challenges and how to respond to it. We have been also supporting movement of human rights cities in Ecuador, in Chile, in Indonesia, and we hope to be following a little bit this path. And to conclude, we hope through all these experiences that we try to gather through the Committee on Social Inclusion and through UCLG to bring this shift of narrative, as I was expressing. We hope these experiences that we are hearing from all the different regions can be instrumental also to build the next step of what we are looking for, is to build standards, shared standards of how to become a human rights city. And we hope that will be a meaningful response also to face the ongoing crisis, but also the future crisis that could happen. Thank you very much, and that's it for me.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. And as you see now, we are, it is 4:16. Actually, original planning was to bring all this discussion to an end by 4:15. So we have already been late for 1 or 2 minutes, but still, I have a couple of questions, received from the audiences, and given the time available, I will try to put them very short. And on top of that, we have also 2 people who is working this participating in this seminar from abroad, at the local level. So also it would be pity, if I don't give the floor to them. So let me give you the floor to you, Mr. Hans Seckers and Ms. Fabiana Goyeneche to speak. Maybe 2 minutes, perhaps, to be able to finish our work as early as possible. And then I will pose one question coming from the floor or coming from the audiences. Then I will give the opportunity to respond, from the side of our panelists. So, Ms. Fabiana Goyeneche, you have the floor for 2 minutes, please. I'm sorry for that.
Thank you very much. I know we have a little time, so I'm going to try to be really quick. I'm really thankful for being here because it's really important for us to share the city's perspective on human rights and what we have been doing and what we are working on to respond to COVID-19. So what I wanted to tell you today is that we think that the pandemic exposed and exacerbated all the issues about human rights. They are creating great challenges in terms of human rights and social inclusion that affected millions of people throughout the world. But it was the local governments who were at the forefront, making citizen demands visible, warning of the worsening of inequalities, giving immediate responses, developing great cooperation actions and alliances between cities. Montevideo, a city committed to human rights, understands that local governments are key to ensuring the rights of the most vulnerable population, generating public policies that include access to care, food, housing, health, as well as promoting the right to equality and non-discrimination. The basic support plan for citizenship was born in a social and economic context of acute impoverishment, loss of jobs, and decline of the real salary of the public and private workers. In this way, Montevideo government is executing a set of measures to face the negative impacts of this situation. This is our plan, our ABC plan, which means Basic Support Plan for Citizenship. And this has different strategies. One is about food providing. We are providing food support, nutritional guidance, and infrastructure conditioning for the preparation and distribution of healthy food, supporting the information of agroecological community gardens too. About equality, we have actions against gender violence that were carried out together with the promotion of the economic autonomy of women. Actions such as a service 365 days a year, comprehensive legal sponsorship, strengthen the Comuna Mujer project, or planning of projects such as the BPR caring communities in conjunction with other cities in Latin America. Those are some of the measures that are adopted by Montevideo. Also, we have work measures that were adopted to alleviate the critical unemployment problem currently experienced in Montevideo. We created 2,000 temporary jobs in the public sector, and we have a special quota for African descendant people, for women, for trans people, that we think it's very important to protect them specially and about their human rights. We have the health emergency and socioeconomic situation that we are experiencing have direct consequences on the overall health of the population. However, although it has had a significant impact on all people, it has even more so on the child population, adolescents, women, the elderly, and other highly vulnerable populations. So we created a medicine fund, territorial strategy for attention to situations of gender-based violence, maltreatment, and child sexual abuse, and extension of the hours of attention in the polyclinics that we have in all the territory of the city. Also, and finally, through the component of territory, the aim is to improve the quality of life of the people who live in those settlements on the outskirts of Montevideo. through the carrying out of roadworks that improve the traffic conditions of the streets and passages that are in a state of deterioration and flooding according to the priority established in conjunction with the citizens, because we think that participation has a key role in protecting human rights in cities. So in order to finish, as a leading city in the defense of the human rights at the international level, Montevideo has also generated synergies with other cities in the region. That's why we think being here with UCLG is so important, because we are building innovative solutions to mitigate the effects of the pandemic. Networks such as UCLG, the Latin American and Caribbean Coalition of Cities Against Racism, Discrimination and Xenophobia, Mercociudades, have been dissemination platforms for these actions, also contributing to sensitize Latin American public opinion on the values of solidarity and respect for human rights and to social and cultural differences. Thank you very much for giving us the floor.
Thank you. We are really impressed with the time. Mr. Hans Sackers from Utrecht, the Netherlands, and could you please be kind enough to make your statement very succinct within 2 minutes time? Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. And for all, thank you very much for organizing this, this meeting, because it's in great support for initiatives on local level and cities trying to localize in human rights. And that also symbolizes that the fact that it's a joint up challenge to work on this, and that we need the local, the regional, the national member states and the international fora to tell the story, but also to become concrete and to talk back with examples like we heard before. And only a few things that, in addition for what Amanda also told us, is that we had a new start 2 years ago at Geneva during a meeting also attended with Kate Gilmore, the former Deputy High Commissioner, and there was a meeting with members of the UCLG, the OHCHR, and many other organizations. And the outcome, of course, we had 20 years of tradition and legacy of the committee of the UCLG. We had 10 years of the Forum of Gwangju, the only place in the world that have really a sustainable and very nice place where things come together. But there happened that we said, well, we need more numbers. We need much more cities for having a bigger movement to have more impact. And secondly, we need a label. We have to work on a serious, professionalized way of how to become a human rights city. And the interesting thing is that things happened the last 2 years, because we got your resolution in the World Human Rights Council, giving this, giving the responsibility to the OHCHR to work on this. We have the UCLG that adopted the idea of in 10 years' time, we want to go from 100 human rights cities to 1,000 human rights cities. We want a bigger movement. We want a campaign. And certainly, at least at the European level, but you also see some examples on the Gwangju Forum coming up next week, that we work on a standard of, the Fundamental Rights Agency in Europe will come up, or launching next week, the first European framework for human rights city, including the standard for how to make an assessment, how to do a kind of peer-to-peer review. So I think we made huge steps in making this real movement, but it's so important that it's not only on the local level that we work on this professionally, but that you on the international and the national level say, tell the story, this is important, this is how we work together. That's also the answer on the question on implementation. Well, implementation is not the right word. What that suggests that there is an international strategy that should be implemented on the local level, but there is the better word is translation, that we work on creative local solutions and talking back to what is happening in the world. So this intermediate, more intermediate, is giving agency on local level, and so I would suggest let's stop talking about implementation, start to talk about translation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I was told that Ambassador Amin Khan of the International Human Rights Commission wanted to speak, but because of the time limit, I'm sorry, I cannot give the floor to him. But instead, I would like to announce on his behalf that this International Human Rights Commission is organizing the World Summit on Human Rights 2021 on the 10th December 2021. And so he wants to invite all the audiences to participate in this conference in person and virtually. And so with that announcement, please forgive me not being able to give you the floor. And one specific question coming from Geneva Cities Hub, and that question is about how to interact with the international community on the part of the local government and also perhaps central governments to implement the mandate given by the international level and the central government level, and the implementation actually should be undertaken by the local government. So how to interact, how to engage with each other. So that is a big challenge, of course, and that is the one question. So because of the time limit, the paucity of time available, I will ask our colleagues, panelists, to speak, to respond, or to add a point to what we have heard, not only from the panelists, but also other speakers. So without designating specific name of our panelists, if you wanted to add some points or respond to what you have heard, please go ahead, and please limit your intervention within 1.5 minutes, please. Maybe El Rabat, Madame El Rabat, do you want to start?
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency. And I would only like to emphasize the fact that it's really important to commit and to align to the international treaties and the international platforms that really supports the rights and the safety, and that is really important to gear to the health security and to the public health security issues. When we're talking about vaccines and the inequities, we need to understand that there is a package of actions that need to be undertaken at the same time. So we're talking about vaccination, but as well we're talking about the community's actions that are needed to support and to work with the vaccines, like the masking, like the distancing, the ventilation, the hand wash, and all of those actions are really needed to be supported by the local governments and by the community engagement and empowerment. And it's really important to really emphasize the essence of rebuilding the resilience of the systems, including the health systems, to support the universal health coverage, which is where equity is an embedded part of its acquisition and of its implications. And it's really important to emphasize the need to better invest in the public health functions and public health systems, together with the health systems and other social and economic systems in place, to reach out to all the communities who are part of the solution of the pandemic and beyond. And I would like to emphasize the fact, if we're talking recovery, this does not mean that that we have reached the resolution of the situation, but we need to really actively see with a future foresight of what we want and how we want our health systems and all our systems to look like into the future, to safeguard the humanity and the well-being. Thank you very much.
Any other panelists who wants to speak at this stage? As Madame Rishmawi?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think it's a great question, actually, because I think what we've seen as we were trying to emphasize is that through partnership with local authorities and local communities, a lot can be done at this stage. And I think all the other panelists highlighted the importance of working together with local authorities. So the 2 points that I'd like to mention in particular with regard to COVID, one is that we as OHCHR, we are present in around now 90 countries. And what we've been able to see is really through working with the local initiatives. The guidelines that the Deputy High Commissioner highlighted actually were able, the moment we brought them in to the attention of local authorities, a lot happened. I give you one example. In the situation of prisons, the High Commissioner highlighted the importance of really for people who are in pre-trial detention, that their situation be considered extremely carefully, and the conditions of detentions. A lot of countries and local authorities actually responded positively and actually cited, I want to mention South Africa in particular here, where actually responded positively and really released a number of people on COVID purpose, released a number of people on COVID purposes. I think for us at OHCHR, we are hosted often by local authorities, and we are hosted not only in capitals and not only in big cities, but often with little community, with small communities in different regions and different countries. And I think that partnership and working together with the partnership with the local community becomes extremely important. The point that I found extremely interesting now, and I would like perhaps a separate conversation on is the work that was mentioned by Fra. I think the colleague from Utrecht who just mentioned the work that the Fra is doing on standards and principles, and also in terms of assessment of how we actually speak about human rights cities, and in a practical way. What do we call a human rights city? How do we actually achieve that? And how do we make this assessment? I think this is important, and I'd like to hear more about that, maybe bilaterally in a different context. But thank you so much. I learned a lot from this conversation, and I'm really, really grateful for the co-organizers that you pulled all this group of people together. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor, the final, I think, intervention to Mr. Khaled Amin.
Yes,
please go ahead, and let's try to make it shorter. Please go ahead. And then just one or two words from Ambassador Yoon.
Okay, thank you very much, Your Excellency. I have, one issue to highlight based on my review to international experiences related to dealing with COVID-19. This issue is when the pandemic started, many countries announced the state of emergency. And actually, according to laws and the constitution, raising the state of emergency automatically suspends the authorities of the local administration and local authorities. And this is actually, I think it's one contradictory issue, and we need to report it and to deal with it. I think in the case or in the state of emergency, I think there should be a kind of specific arrangements that keep the authorities of local administration to deal with this catastrophic events, rather than just suspend the authorities by the law. The other thing which is related to that is the capacity of local administration. This is very important issue because most of the training and the capacity building happened over the last decade, maybe focused on the day-to-day operation and the municipal services of local administration, rather than focusing on crisis management and the resilience, given the fact that this should be the responsibility of central government rather than local government. I think we need to go vice versa, given the COVID-19 pandemic. The last thing, I heard from my colleague in this discussion, Ms. Mona, the need to document actually the policies, and I think this is very important. And here I want to share with you, there is the Egyptian government created two policy and measures trackers. One tracker for social and economic policies taken, and the other one was just for women. And the one for women included 106, as I remember, measures during the crisis, and it get commented by UN Women and UNDP, and Egypt ranked first among North African and West Asian countries according to UN Women. So I just want to refer to this, and maybe we need to have a kind of regional or global policy or measures tracker to document these important actions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then Ambassador Yun, please.
To be short.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to pick up on the nice comment by Hans and the presentation by Amanda on the importance of connection between local governments, because the concept of human rights and all these values, in a way, can be regarded as abstract ones, but the local governments are the ones who face their citizens and people on the front line, and they can turn these concepts into practical their policies. So they're the ones who can operationalize all these concepts. And what's good about our discussion and debate among all these cities, and I want to praise the point raised by Hans that we need more cities to join this forum, is that we can compare our notes, and then we can our actual application on the ground doesn't have to be the same, but you can tailor it according to your own circumstances, but you can also feel that there are universal values that you need to keep in mind. And then I think that's the beauty of our debates in the line of UCLG or other groupings of local governments. So I think today's session was very, very constructive, and it gave a lot of inspiration for Gwangju as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your positive remarks about this discussion session. And the final comments will come from Ms. Amanda Martinez to make some additional points, and then I will wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will be trying to be as quick as possible. Just on the question on how to better engage I was saying the question from the Geneva Cities Hub. We are trying to make very concrete steps to create this link and this collaboration between the UN and UCLG in this case, to strengthen the human rights movement at the international level. It's still, I mean, we need to say that it's still a very new topic. It's a new topic for the UN in general international discussion, but it's also a very new topic for local and regional governments on the way they can. Hans was saying about how we can digest these human rights principles, not maybe to implement, but to translate human rights at the local level. And one of the key messages we have on that is that it should come also from the existing experience of local government, not only providing guidelines, but really trying to base on the entire experience that we are seeing and we have been experiencing over the past 20 years on the concrete responses led by local governments. And with one main goal is on how we can institutionalize human rights as main principle to guide local policies. And that's it. I just wanted to conclude on that point, but sharing that we are having this agreement ongoing with, between UCLG and OHCHR with 10 points, and hopefully that would mark concrete step to advance on the recognition and the role of local governments promoting human rights.
Much for your comments, response to the points raised. Okay, now please allow me to wrap up our discussion. I think we have now finally arrived at the very end of our panel discussion. And distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, in bringing this session to a close, I would like to express my sincere appreciation and special thanks to the panelists and the audiences for the valuable contributions. International human rights commitments would bear fruit only when they are actually realized on the ground. And we have seen from today's discussion that local governments certainly are significant actors in doing so. I hope that we will be able to build up further from the takeaways of today's discussion. And in closing, I would like to convey my sincere gratitude to the colleagues from the core group and OHCHR for their close cooperation in organizing this virtual event. Finally, my deepest thanks are, of course, reserved for the Diplo Foundation for its valuable support that has enabled this event to run smoothly. I wish you all a pleasant evening and morning. Thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone. I hope I will see you soon in person. Thank you very much. Goodbye.